Rebel Waltz by Kay Hooper. Narrated by Lyssa Browne.
4D. Who told me what to do with the toga. Chapter 1. Spanish moss hung from the towering trees, draping branches, shadowing the drive in coolness. It should have looked gloomy, but didn't somehow. Sunlight filtered through the leaves and moss to create a mosaic on the hard-packed ground. Rory stood leaning against the opened car door, gazing around and noting that nature had been allowed to encroach on what had once, probably, been stunningly beautiful land. The woods were now thickly grown with brambles and nearly impassable. The distant pasture, although obviously still cultivated for hay, was surrounded by a once white three-rail fence that looked more imagined than real. A gazebo nearly invisible beneath years of ivy strove valiantly to remain standing, and the driveway was packed dirt with not a trace of gravel or pavement, but many a deep rut. His cool gray eyes measuring, Rory calculated what it would take to restore the land. A riding path through the woods, he mused, and a footpath and benches for guests in need of shaded solitude. The old gazebo torn down and another constructed. The stables weren't visible, but probably they, too, would need a major overhaul. He thought of the other plantations he'd purchased and converted into resort-style hotels, then looked steadily up the tree-lined drive to the house. Outwardly, it was in better shape than most of the few remaining privately owned plantations. It possessed wide, shallow steps, a veranda extending along two sides, solid white Doric columns, and the landscaping near the building had been kept up. Red brick mellowed by time was decorated here and there by climbing ivy. The shutters appeared to be in good repair, and there were no broken windows in sight, although heaven only knew what rotten floorboards and moldy draperies awaited him inside. Jasmine Hall's noble owner had never allowed cameras inside the place, so Rory hadn't the faintest idea what he'd find. Sighing, he got back into the car and continued up the drive. He'd stay 2 weeks, as invited, he decided, to look the place over and find out if old Jake Clairmont was really serious this time about selling Jasmine Hall. Twice before, the crusty old man had spread the word, only to back out gleefully when Rory and others had expressed interest in buying. The second time had been in Charleston, nearly a year before. The third time, 6 weeks ago. No one but Rory had taken the bait. And he was still vaguely surprised and slightly suspicious that he had been promptly invited out to visit the estate. He frowned as he parked the car in the graveled area near the house and got out, wondering if Clairmont had been foxy enough to have weeded out less interested parties by offering to sell the first 2 times and then retracting his offer. It put Rory on guard, his keen business sense wary of an attempt to drive up the price, although, of course, the place was priceless. Pushing the thought aside, he went up the broad, shallow steps and made use of the shining brass knocker. He had to use it 3 times, the third time with considerable force before the heavy, solid oak door finally swung open. And in that moment, Rory experienced the somewhat bewildering shock of a man whose entire attention was quite forcibly ripped from all thoughts of business. She was an antebellum Southern belle, complete from the raven hair dressed in ringlets to the silk slippers peeping from the hem of her hoop skirt. The gown was emerald silk off the shoulders and breathtakingly low cut, and the faint rustle of each movement announced the presence of at least a dozen petticoats. Her face was heart-shaped and delicate, each feature finely drawn by an appreciative artist. She seemed young, perhaps in her early 20s, although the costume might have been deceptive. And Rory thought dizzily that Scarlett O'Hara had a rival here, in green eyes and an impossibly tiny waist. "Whatever you're selling, we don't want any." If her voice was soft and drawling, her tone at least was thoroughly modern.